You lot, how's it going? So I've noticed it seems to be a bit of a variation in the comments, which means there's a variation in the problems that you lot or other people are having with your Nitro cars all the time, and I like to observe that variation, and I find it quite interesting. The latest one is, for some reason, quite a lot of you are having your cars randomly just rev up. Now, I know the reasons for this, but obviously you lot don't. So let's have a little look through what the reasons may be, and I'm going to use this as an example. Not the bag, the car that's in the bag. We'll use that as the example, because there can be quite a few reasons, but not a lot. Because remember, a Nitro engine is an extremely simple engine. After all, it's two-stroke. There is no valves, no timing. Well, there is timing obviously, but that's cut into the liner, so you can't adjust that. Well, it can be adjusted, but you can't. Doesn't matter. That's for more advanced, but it's simple. So let's have a look and see why you lot are having trouble with your engines just revving up randomly, uncontrollably, shall we? So, before we have a look at the car, I decided to take a carburetor off of another engine so I can show you what the carburetor looks like and what it actually does. Because a lot of the time the carburetor is the problem. There is and can be other reasons why your engine would rev uncontrollably, randomly sometimes, or maybe if you bought a second-hand car and you start it up for the first time in your hand and it revs up randomly. But let's start at the beginning. In my experience and in my opinion, the main reason is improper setup of the carburetor. Now, it can be improper setup with the throttle trim as well, but you need to make sure that your throttle trim is set, and the trim is on your transmitter. That's set to push your throttle closed. Alright, so that's one thing, because if your throttle trim is set wrong and it's not closing all the way, then it doesn't matter any adjustment you do on the carb, it won't make a difference, because your servo is opening that throttle or keeping it open. You need it so that it pushes it all the way shut. And if you've got a twisty carb, it's exactly the same, just you'll have a twisty thing rather than a slide. Okay, but it's exactly the same process that I'm going to explain here. There is no difference. Well, there is one small variable on a twisty carb, but if I can find one, I'll show you what that is later on. It can come up a cropper for quite a lot of people. Now, your tick over screw is going to be your culprit, in my opinion. So you need to check this first. Now, if you can see that in there, a lot of Americans are obsessed with this. That there, you can see daylight through there, can't you? Yep, that's called a gap. Alright, obviously. Now, what you want to do, now this carburetor come off of an engine that I had in my little box of scrap engines, and it would have been running quite a high tick over because that gap is really big. Now the Americans love to go on about the gap. They call it an idle gap. Over here we don't really go on about it quite so much because it's not massively important, but them lot love a millimetre. It's meant to be a mil, that gap. I always say to people, you set that gap to whatever the engine likes. You play around with it and get it to where the engine runs the best. All engines are different, but you can set that to a millimetre as a baseline if you want to. And how are you going to measure it? Well, you have to get a set of calipers, or maybe just a little measure, a little rule or something to try and measure the gap in between there. But you adjust that gap with this screw on the side here. Now some carburetors will have a little screw poking out with a spring coiled up around the outside of it. Other ones have it looking like this. Alright, this is your tick over screw, and all it is a simple stopper screw. It doesn't do a single dicky bird to the mixture of the carb. It doesn't adjust any mixture, it doesn't adjust any fueling, it doesn't adjust, well, it does adjust air in a way because it stops the slide, but I've taken it out completely now. Look, That's what it looks like. Yeah, it's simply just a little stopper screw. Thank you, Mr. Camera. Simply just a little stopper screw. It doesn't do anything else. Right, now without that in, that now goes all the way shut. That will be no tick over. That will be engine stop. Yeah, and you can take it out. Well, you can take the slide all the way out if you wanted to. There you go. Slides all the way out. There's the low speed needle poking through there. Look. Now that little stopper screw goes in this gap, in this little slit in the throttle slide, and that's what stops it. Not only does it stop it from going out, but it also stops it from going in. So let's put that back like that. So you adjust that with this screw, and if I hold that closed with, I don't think I'm about to do this actually, right. If I hold that closed with my fingers and thumb, as you can see, right, and I do the screw up, don't know if you're going to be able to see or not, maybe. Do the screw up. Come on, Johnny boy. Right. And now you should be able to see it pushing. Come on, focus. God, don't want to focus on this, does it? Come on. There we go. You should be able to see it pushing the slide. You see just a little bit of daylight. See, it's pushing the slide open. Alright? Even though I'm pushing on it. So now it won't go no more than that. Now, I've explained that in a long way, but I need you to understand how this works. If you've got an understanding on how something works, you've got a better way, you've more chance of actually getting it to work. If that gap is too big, it will rev up. When you start it, you may get cold feet, and because it might go, and you think it's going to rev to the moon. It won't rev to the moon. It's impossible for it to rev to the moon, because that is to the moon. That is simply just revving quite a bit more than you expect. You probably get a little bit scared and panic. Alright? That's what a lot of you do. You panic. And I don't blame you, because if you don't know what's going to happen, you might think it's going to blow up. You know, you want to protect your investment, don't you? You've spent a lot of money on this car, and you don't want it to blow up or do any damage. So my advice to you is, if you're okay playing around a bit of fiddling, close that, take this screw out until there is nearly no gap there, or you could make it so there's a very small, very small gap of roughly a mil, but I wouldn't go mad on measuring it. You know, something like you can't even see the bloody daylight. You can just about see the daylight poking through this side of it, look. Just about. That's probably about right. And you've eradicated the way that it might rev up, yeah, because you've cut all the air out of it, more or less, yeah, so it won't rev up. It's more or less impossible for it to rev now, because you've shut the carburetor. There's no air getting into it. But that doesn't mean that it still can't rev up. I was going to use that car as an example, but I think a better idea would be to get an engine like this one, for example, and show you. So you're going to have seals go on the crankshaft. There's a bearing here, and there's also a seal, and there's one at the back where the back plate goes on. That's also sealed up. If those are leaking, it can suck in air, unmetered air, through those seals. Now, two-stroke engines rely on a vacuum, well, four strokes as well, but two strokes particularly rely on a vacuum in the crankshaft. Okay, that's how they suck in the air as the piston is, this one's seized up so I can't show you, but as the piston's going down, it's expelling the spent nitro and air through the exhaust, and simultaneously getting ready to suck in new air and nitro fuel through the carburetor, which would be on there, by the way, sucking it in there. Right, now the carb is metering the amount of air through here and the amount of fuel through here, if we can ever focus, that the engine is allowed to harvest, the engine is allowed to get. This is a metering device. It's what it is. It's a metering device. If air can be sucked in from around, there's a little seal on the carb, if air can be sucked in from around the base of the carburetor, then that's unmetered air, and it will just suck it in. And if it can suck the air in, it will at the same time suck in more fuel, because there's more air, it will suck in more fuel, and it's almost as if this is open, yeah. And the same goes for the seals around this crankshaft. If the seals are going bad, it can suck in air through here, right? Because these all should be sealed up, so the only place it can suck air in is through the carburetor. But obviously, if these seals are bad, it will be sucking it in through here as well, and through there. Now, in my opinion, that is a very, very rare case for most people. And a lot of you that have been asking the questions in the comments and sending me emails that I don't see for days and days and days, and then I reply to you all in one go, and by that time you probably had enough anyway. The best way is to comment. Anyway, usually it's the carburetor, so you need to do what I said with the tick over screw, and also make sure that your needles aren't too lean. Now, if your needles are too lean, it can cause it to rev, because it hasn't got enough nitro. Now, you might think it needs more fuel in order to rev, but no. If there's a weak mixture with an engine, it will want to rev a little bit higher than if there was a rich mixture. So if you've got a scenario where you're starting up your engine and it's just revving up and the wheels are spinning like mad, as a lot of you say, the wheels spin like mad, then you can always just get your low end. Well, your high end is really the one you want to start at, so start with your high end, turn it out, get it, and just turn it out maybe one turn, yeah, and just for safe measures, get your low end, turn that out one turn as well, fire it up and see what happens, and keep an eye on that tick over screw. And also make sure that your servos are set, if you know if your trim's set properly, because when you have it in the neutral, so you're not touching the trigger on your transmitter, it will just be closed. That will be all the way in and it will be closed. That means it's set well enough for you to get your engine running well. If you're not touching the trigger but your throttle is a little bit open like that, yeah, that's like half throttle, then you need to adjust your trim on your transmitter to get it to be closed when you're not touching the trigger. Yeah, a lot of transmitters, the trims are set wrong, and it makes people think that there's a problem with their engine or with their carburetor, and they go turning all the needles and the screws and doing all this, and they get all frustrated and go, it's not working, everything I'm trying doesn't work. Well, the problem is with the transmitter, with the trim on the radio gear. So we've gone through what is the most likely scenario, in my opinion. A badly set up tick over screw, keeping the throttle slide open too far, making it rev a little bit higher. You don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're looking at. It revs, the wheels spin like mad, you panic and you go, it's revving to the moon. But it's not, it's just revving a bit higher than you expect. Turn the screw out, let the tick over go all the way closed. It won't run, it won't start like that. Alright, very important to mention, it will not start at all with that closed all the way. So if you turn this out, yeah, you're going to have to get your transmitter and open it up like that, or set the trim to open it up. Most of you are smart enough to about work this out, but I'm just giving you the blueprint to work this out. You've done your needles, make sure it's not too lean. If you turn them out one turn and it still revs a bit, turn them out another whole turn, yeah? Add a bit more fuel. The more fuel there is, the less it will rev, okay? And that goes for across the board. The more nitro you're putting into it, the less RPMs you're going to get out of that engine. You could go down this route, but don't worry about anything I've said. I just wanted to explain about the crank bearings, because seals, sorry, because it can be a possibility, but it's very unlikely for any of you lot. You know, very unlikely. That's a last case scenario, that is, them seals. Very unlikely, and there's also more characteristics that the engine will show if that is the problem. 99.9% of the time, the issue is with the carburetor. It needs to be sorted out. Or the seal around there. But I wouldn't go messing around with any seals. Do this kind of thing first. Is there anything else that I can think of that would cause your engine to rev up randomly, aside from interference with the transmitter? I'm assuming that most of you haven't got any kind of interference with the transmitter. You've got improper settings somewhere. Because that's what it will be. Improper settings. So yeah, there we go. Small recap. I know I've gone around this quite a long, but I like to explain things as in-depthly as I possibly can to make sure that you all understand my point. So go here first. Tick over screw. It might not look like that. I had somebody a few weeks ago try to tell me that their carburetor doesn't have a tick over screw. It will do. They all look a little bit different. Some of them, as I said, have a little screw point. Some of them are at the back. I mean, for example, this one is at the back of the carburetor, so it'll be up against the engine, yeah? Some of them are at the front of the engine, carburetor. Some of them are at the side, here, here, here. It might be a little screw pointing out with a spring wrapped around it on the outside, or it could be one like this, which is encased. It could be at the back of the carb near the engine, or it could be round the other way. It could be at the front, alright? But it will be there, and that's what it looks like. You can't mistake it. Yeah, play around with that first. Make sure that your gap, take your air filter off, have a look at the gap, and make sure it's very, very small. Don't be frustrated if it won't run. Just turn it in a Nat's cock until it'll start. But that's pretty much it. It's more or less impossible for it to rev up to the moon, as a lot of you seem to say, without something catastrophically wrong. And I have completely missed the point, but I will mention it at the end here, because I'm assuming a lot of you aren't daft enough to have this happen and not realise it. But make sure your throttle isn't jammed open. I have had some people in the past try to tell me that it goes to full throttle the minute they start it, and it revs and revs and revs and it won't stop. I don't know what the outcome was, but it is possible for your carburetor to be stuck open like that. It might get seized open. If it's one that you collected from somebody that's been stuck in a shed, it might be seized open, or it could just be a bit stuck, have a bit of grit in it, or maybe your servo's at it or something. It's stuck open and you've not realised. Make sure that it is operating as it should do. Make sure that it is shut before you try to start it. So that's pretty much it. There's not a lot else really. I don't know why you're looking down there so low for. There's not a lot else that can cause the scenarios that most of you seem to be having at the moment, with your engines randomly revving up the minute you start them. Quite a lot of you seem to have bought second-hand nitro cars. You're starting them up for the first time. You bought them as non-runners, and you're starting them up, and they're revving up to the moon, as you say. There's more than one scenario with this. I've had quite a lot of this. This is why I'm making the video on it, because there's so many people. There must be at least 20 people that emailed me, and probably more that have put it in comments. So yeah, there's not many other reasons. Check all the stuff I've just said, and I know a lot of you are quite clever, yeah? So I've given you the blueprint to work out what could be wrong with your engine. look at other things, you know, play around, and you'll see if there's anything else that could be wrong, things that might not quite be right. But always remember, it needs air and fuel to rev. Yeah, if you've cut off the air, it won't rev. Simple as that. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if you've had this problem and you've managed to fix it off the back of this video, or if you just mended it. What did you do to mend your engine so that it didn't rev up randomly? I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Don't let people take you for granted, and don't take other people for granted, because we're all on this planet together. We all look after each other. That's the way it should be. I'll see you later. All the best.